Alright, so welcome to a kind of a different episode today, and this is where I will be talking specifically about how language acquisition, for those who don't know what that is, I'll explain in a bit, and mixed with spirituality. When I say I do the quote-unquote thing, it's because I don't like the labels, but that's what it is. People call it that way. So, yeah, I guess without further ado, let's go straight into it. 女性人々からだ。はい。يعيش يعيش ويقع سيوزف ونشد سيرو سينانوجم يوسف يوسف جابيتو كندا. Language acquisition. What is language acquisition, first of all? Language acquisition is, for lack of a better word, basically a more natural way of just picking up language. And that means basically, because usually with language acquisition, when it comes to languages, we think of languages like, oh, being able to speak it, right? It's like right off day one, being able to speak it. But I don't see it that way. So, language acquisition is basically having specific techniques. I personally have kind of let go of specific techniques. What I do is I focus on one main thing. And I will tell you after that. It's actually written on the board here, but I'll show you what I mean. So, that's language acquisition. So basically we've been actually hardwired, just like anything, any creature, any being in the world is hardwired to just be present. We just forgot how to do that. And that's where spirituality comes in, right? The term spirituality. So when it comes to spirituality, people think it's like, oh, this is the method, this is the method, this is the method, this is the method, and so on and so forth and all that stuff. It doesn't have to be that way. What really it boils down to is surrendering. Okay, so I'm going to kind of walk you through what I've come up with. And I've said this in other videos, but I never really gave a sort of visual. So in this case, it's probably for some, if you ever come across this, it might come off as kind of almost, there's a tinge of hypocrisy because I'm using technique in a way here, right? I'm showing you like, oh, this is the teaching method. And for those who don't know this one, but for those who don't know, I'm a language teacher, but that's just the identity of this form. That's just what it is. It's just, I went into teaching, I did a degree or so, whatever, in languages. And on the way for myself in terms of, because my desire was to get better language, because I love languages, I love culture, and I love connecting with people. Ironically, it has changed after the pandemic. So it's become quite different, but I still have that inner desire to just kind of connect, and that's what I'm going to talk about in a bit here. So when it comes to how it's linked with spirituality is basically spirituality, but I don't call it that way. It's all about being present. For me specifically, spirituality is presence. Presence, when I say spirituality, I don't mean like do this, do that. It's not about the doing, it's about the being. You've heard from many gurus out there. There's Eckhart Tolle, there's other teachers, like there's Carrie Kay that I follow, there's and a bunch of other people who are in this. So everybody's going through that, right? Teal Swan is one of my favorites as well. I've been doing shadow work for a long time. And these are the methods that they do have. They methodized things. There's a methodology behind it. That's true, because that's what we're used to. The key component really is not the method. The methods are stepping stones, just like languages, like words are. Eckhart puts it that way, right? They're stepping stones. Because what if you just had a manual? Think about it. You have like a driver's manual. Okay, so you know beforehand that you have this, let me change the camera a bit here. So you know beforehand that you have this knowledge somehow. And you're probably wondering, well, how are you going to retain that knowledge? People think, oh, it's just when you're driving. But really ask yourself the question, did you retain it before and because you started driving? Like you really get into your car, you check the lights, you check the lights, you go around, you put on your seatbelt, you start feeling the steering wheel, you put your hands at 10 and 2, right? Does that, like, you know, and you start practicing and all that stuff, you know, you go to the parking lot, you practice parallel parking, etc., etc., etc. Does that quantify as retaining? There's learning, which is just knowing, but is it retaining? Is it embodying it? Personally, for me, I don't think so. Because in my experience, it's not really about the doing either. It's more about all of it together, right? There's a reason why I kind of want to tie this to astrology. There's a reason why the seasons work the way they do. Or at least for me, that's how I understand it. Or the elements work together. They're not separate. We think they're separate. Right? We believe they're separate. They're not. And it's all in one thing, seemingly behaving as separate things. Because we think in three-dimensional perspective that everything is linear. So one this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and this, and this, and this, and this. Everything is sequential. That's not really how it works. Because people wonder why. It's like, why do we want to, like, even just the concept of having the brain separate, right? Just like this part and this, that, but it all works as one system, just like your whole body works as one system. If you just take out a part, like your liver, you think on its own it's going to function on its own? No, it's not going to. It's going to work with the whole ecosystem. But just like our bodies are an ecosystem, a part of an ecosystem of an ecosystem, we just feel like we don't see it, because we don't see it with our eyes, that we don't accept and believe that everything is connected. This is why I believe that these two, at the very least, as two things, okay, are separate, but they're not. Because it goes down to, so what is language, right? I wrote here, I don't know if you could see it, but language, okay, language is language. What is language? Well, we think always is Spanish, French, German, Italian, Portuguese, Russian, English, Korean, Chinese, Japanese, whatever, the popular languages, whatever, right? We think language is like just like that. But is it? Ask yourself the question, is it? But is it sounds? People might say, oh, is it sounds? Like, okay, yeah, sure, it sounds that over time have been developed into meaning. And why is that? Because we're trying to communicate something. Communication, right? It stems from communication. Communication is this connection, this sort of desire to just like, I want to say what I want to say so you understand me. Right? So that's the intention, the desire. Right? And then there's a desire. Intention comes before desire, because intention is intention, but desire is the pulse of like, I want you to understand me. Right? Because we want to connect. And why do we want to connect? Because we want someone to understand us. We want someone to know. But where does that really come from? If you're looking at it deeper in terms of like, why do I want to connect with someone? Why do I want to relate with someone? Because we're social beings. And why are we social beings? Because that's part of survival. But why do we survive? Why do we want to survive? Because we have this connection to, and attachment specifically, in the ego, to the form. Because there's a belief that it is separate, but intrinsically, instinctively, beyond instinctively, as a true essence, knows that we are actually one, but because of this layer that we considered, or we started calling the ego, the false I, as the ancient Greeks put it, believes that it's not one. There's no oneness anymore. There's no unity. So we want to connect again. We want to go home. We want to connect. We want to relate. And that kind of ties in with a bit of, it's for another topic, but a part of it is also self-worth. Self-worth is an aspect of believing that we are not connected, right? And why is that? So why is self-worth like that? Because self-worth means I value what's outside of me. I value this is this form, and therefore I value what's outside of me, because there's this form. We believe that we're separate. When something is separate, it feels that it's like there's a missing part of it. So it wants that part back. We want that part back. This is why there's that connection. This is why there's that desire, and then therefore intention to communicate. Self-worth is kind of hovers around between these areas right here. Okay, so how does that work when it comes to language itself? You seem like, well, what is he talking about? It's like, well, language. Think about language, right? Think about what you want to say. Think about the whole, why am I saying this in the first place? Why am I expressing this one? Because it comes from, if you process it inwards, if you come back down to present, if you meditate, hopefully you do, those who are watching, right? You connect it to what is language. For example, if I just said like, I want to go to the party, or I don't want to go to the party. Just that intention of saying I want to is a desire. It's intention, it's desire, you're communicating it, right? But you want to relay, want to connect that message. But say when I want to, it's not really about going to the party and saying I want to connect with someone there. It's more about the fact that I'm telling you this means I want you to understand. I want to transmit that what I'm saying is something that you should understand. Again, going back to the ego thing, right? But the fact that they don't understand is an assumption that stems from separation, which in itself, there's a hidden component, or the whole, which is the essence of already knowing that we're connected. But because I know and believe somehow that you're not connected, therefore I must clarify, transmit, and connect with you to understand that what I mean is something that you see what I mean. So it's kind of like this cyclical sort of thing. So this is where we get into the whole where, because of the way we were brainwashed, and I'm going to say brainwashed, to believe that, sorry, I think there's a bird outside, to believe that because we're brainwashed, we believe that not only is everything separate. Not only is everything separate. See, I corrected myself there. So not only is everything separate. Let me go on this side. Okay. So not only is everything separate, but the fact that we have to believe in this whole structure. Comes from the structure of the system that's been going on for thousands of years, if not hundreds. I would say a minimum 500 years. Because I looked it up and it was like, when did academia started doing this sort of language thing and grammar and translation, all that stuff, right? It was about around the 1500s. I think it was part when universities were established. I think it was between Italy and France or something like that. I don't know, Europe for sure. I mean, so that stirs that structure, right? I don't know if it exists in other countries, but the fact that the structure of like writing first and reading and then speaking and then listening in that order. You go to a language class, right? Your old system, established language classes. What do they teach you first? The writing system. You learn how to write it, and then you learn how to read it. And then you actually come out with this whole thing where it's like you have to speak right away. So you speak the language. Not even speaking, you're just regurgitating the sounds that you're making according to what they want you to say. And then The thing that's basically null and void is from there is listening. They say, no, you don't listen. You don't need to listen. You just hear what I say and you regurgitate what I say. Right? But listening is an important component. In fact, it's more than listening. Why is it more important? Probably the most important thing. Not because it's a method, not because it's like, I must listen literally with this ear. It's deeper than that. It's when you are sitting, right? It's when you are sitting and you're actually observant. But there's another deeper layer to that, where you're not just observant, but you're actually present. If we ask ourselves the question, why is it that children are good at languages? Let's sit for a second there. Aren't children good at languages because they don't care? Are they stupid? Are they because we're not, or they're not the adults that we are? That they know less, so they're innocent and they're creatures to be molded in our image. That's the old system, right? It's not just the old system, it's that whole conditioned system, that whole conditioned belief that children don't come with a set of skills. That children don't come with the ability to be present. That children, specifically babies and toddlers, cannot know what we're talking about just because they're not, academically educated. That they don't know what we know. They don't have the experience we have. You know that saying, right? It's saying that where they come from has nothing to do with the fact that, so we're born separate. We are born separate. How does that work? You could call it the chicken and the egg thing. That doesn't make sense. Because if you think about it, if you're born separate, that means that you can never be born out of the union of an egg cell and a sperm cell, traditionally speaking, But there is no thing there. There's no. Yes, those are what we call two separate things, but in its own self, it's from the body, right? It's from the reproductive system. Then what? Let's go deeper into that one. They're the reproductive systems. Okay, so does that mean that I'm separate? So where did I come from? People have been questioning this, and people have been asking this for centuries, thousands of years possibly. Where do we come from? Where do we come from? Where do we come from? Because the fact is, where do we come from? The idea that we're coming from is a belief it stems from the belief of separation. That we're I am this separate thing. We think of the form, the body, the skin itself, the form that holds the body, is this sort of this outer layer, the walls in a room, right? The walls of this body. So it's that we identify with that. Therefore, we think that this must be the separate thing. And there's never anything connecting us to anything else. But that's why we challenge things and we question things, like when we get mad at someone, when we kill someone, when we persecute someone, we get mad at them, or we do it to our objects, to our things, the things that we do. This board right here, the room I'm in, the pen, the markers I'm using, the phone I use, this laptop right here. All of everything, we think that they are separate from us, therefore. Do you see the ironic thing? There's a paradox there, right? Because we believe we are separate, and yet our essence knows otherwise. We think that that's the reality. And we're used to shrugging it off and saying, well, I get mad, and then you get over it. And you do it over again, and you do it over again. And what does that do? It's a conditioning, right? So similarly, when it comes to this lack of presence that we as humans have had for such a long time. Meaning, when I say presence, I mean connection. We believe that everything else we've done, including this field that we call languages, this field of study, this thing, also all on its own, also separated, is something to be put in a box as well. Right? So I hope this is making sense. Right? So this presence thing that I'm talking about, this is where presence becomes more of an important thing. And the reason why presence is important is because if you think about presence, it's not a doing, it's a being. You can see people who are mostly, not necessarily just observant, but still. You look at plants. Plants are probably one of the most observant living things on the planet. When I say living, I mean like biologically speaking, in terms of biology. According to the semantics in biology, everything is alive then. But we don't believe that, because as long as it's not moving, meaning it doesn't have a heart, it doesn't have what we have, right? You see how not only is it anthropocentric, meaning very centric towards human beliefs, but also like this kind of centric, that's separation centric. it's egocentric, right? Because the ego believes it's separate, it's special, it's unique, because it's afraid that it's like it never had its sovereignty in the first place. But its sovereignty isn't found in separation. The sovereignty of things is the acceptance, the knowing, and the embodying, and the actual being of connectedness. So how does this tie into language again? Well, I wrote this down here. So I'm going to be away from the camera for a bit. So, sort of. So there's an inner knowing, knowing understanding. Knowing understanding is when you just know. So for example, when we understand something like a concept, there's a difference between knowing about it, like just knowing as a fact, and my intellect is analyzing it. I just know the word. I just know the meaning of the word. And then what? Do we know how to use it? Okay, so we're told how to use it. Okay, it's in the dictionary, and we're getting examples, and we're getting all these dialogues, these exercises, these drills, yada yada yada. Or someone tells us this is what it means, this is how you do it. Oh, it's like, oh great, thanks for telling me that. I know now. 3 days later, you forget. Why? Because there's no connection to the whole. There's no connection to it starts actually with the body. In fact, it starts with the body so much that it's connected to the subconscious area of the brain, back here, right? Some of you have already heard this, maybe, but that's what the subconscious is. And according to research, there's the 3 parts of the brain, right? There's the lizard brain, there's the mammalian brain, and there's the neocortex, which is the human brain. The ape brain, right here, right? Regardless, that's not the point. For me, in my experience, I just know that when I look at it as a whole, right, as a whole experience, and really this is why people sometimes say immersion, right? But sometimes immersion isn't enough, where you're just sitting there and you're just being flooded by all these things. There will come a time when you need to kind of express. The reason why it's important to be whole in this case is because that's how communication works, right? If you're just there and sitting there and there's no talking, that's it. There's no flow, it's just going inwards, right? It's the same thing as pouring water into a bottle of water, water bottle, So you have this little Nalgene bottle, right? You pour water in there. What happens is if you get a bunch of information in there. I mean, this is a poor analogy, I think. But when I say poor, I don't mean like in a judgmental way. But what I'm saying is like if you pour water into this bottle, it fills up. And then it overflows, right? Right? And then what happens? Okay, there's an overflowing of information. But is it really how the brain works? I read somewhere that there's an infinite amount of information that goes through the brain. So that means that ties in with the whole our own spirituality, our own essence, which is actually also infinite. So for me, the subconscious area of the brain is not just the subconscious. The subconscious is tied to the connection to our essence, which is our source. We are part of that source. It's like this analogy that I got was like the ray of the sun's rays. We are the rays. We believe we're separate, but we come from that same thing. But we were never separate from that. We just think we're separate. We believe we're separate. And we believed for a long time that we're separate. So there's that connection. Right? So with that connectedness, when we go back into it, when we start to remember, we start to go, oh, I see. But that comes from, it starts with stillness. Stillness, as Carrie Kay puts it, stillness, connection, and something else. Stillness, presence, and connection. Right? The point is, it comes down to that. It doesn't mean that when we acquire language, it doesn't mean that we just sit there and observe all the time. Well, you're going to do that for the rest of your life? No. But when we're still, not just still like still, that's a component of that. It's not just like also being slow. Because I remember this one time, actually several times, where I would slow down, hoping that would bring me stillness. No, it's not that. It actually kind of comes down basically, that's why I said in the beginning of the video, I said stillness, it all comes down to surrender. When I say surrender, I don't mean like I kind of give up. In a way, that's kind of related. It's kind of the same similar energy. So we're surrendering, meaning like, cut my head off, yes please. No, I mean surrender as in right? But it starts with bringing the attention to the body. Right? I repeat, bringing the attention to the body. Not something for you to memorize, not something for us to go back to the video and write down and take notes, and as if, you just be. You just be. That sounds like a song. There's this one video I watched where he's like, I'm not gay. It's so funny. I forgot what his video was. I forgot what his name was. But it was a hilarious video. Anyways, so there's through the presence thing. So just being, really. It's really, I just want to correct us and say like in being. Right? There's that being thing, right? So there's that knowing thing, understanding thing. And then there's a timing. I mean, these are just concepts, right? We all know that words have their limits. But for the sake of the whole thing, the topic of today, of acquiring languages, and at the same time being present with it, just being, there's a timing that comes with it too. So what I mean by timing is like you'll know when you are ready to express something. Without force. So for example, I'll give you an example. I'm going to speak in German. See, right there, I'm already analyzing it. But if you try to pay attention to how I say it, like my body language, the energy that comes out, there's a part of you, your intuition will be able to tell, and also instinct will be able to tell whether what I'm saying comes from a place where it's natural and comes from a place where I actually am thinking about it. Now, it's not to say that thinking about something is a bad thing. This isn't about that at all. It's just that for me personally, at least for me, when it comes to language, I've always had this desire to go past fluency. When I say fluency, I want to make sure this is understood. Fluency is flow, right? But a lot of people feel like fluency has a lot to do with the amount that you know. Oh, I know 10,000 words. How is that fluency? It's like saying pouring that water into this bottle and saying 1,000 milliliters. It's a measurement right there. 1,000 milliliters. That's how much water is in here. Therefore, this is fluent. Again, this is a kind of a poor analogy, but you see what I mean? It's like, why is that? How is that fluency? The essence behind it, how the water flows, and why the water was surrendering in its purpose to flow on its own, just like air does, just like solid does. When we dent it, just because something is solid does not mean it cannot be dented. On its own, it behaves in a certain way. That behavior I'm talking about is the essence. Essence is what creates that. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, right? So, coming back down to the whole timing thing, when we're trying to speak something, when we're trying to say something in the language, it's not, you're going to feel, only you truly know whether it comes from a natural place or you're actually thinking about it. And again, I'm not saying either one is right or wrong. For me personally, my intention, yes, and goal, to be honest, was to get to the point where it's just, okay, well, I want confidence. That's really what it is, right? Fluency gives us confidence. Again, fluency is the flow, the essence of like going with the moment. People forget this. There's one little thing, by the way. Fluency is also acquired through listening. People think it's like fluency. What? Isn't fluency speaking? Isn't it only just fluent speaking? Well, if that were the case, then linear reality is the reality. It's only going from backward to forward. You cannot go backwards. In fact, it's not even about linearness. It's about only going forward, and that's it. There's no looking back. There's no flow. Two-way traffic does not exist. There's no breathing in. There's only breathing out. There's no flow. It doesn't go this way. Circles don't. So there's no such thing as circles. Fuck circles. You know. So how this again ties into timing is that when you're ready, when it feels ready, you say maybe a word here or there. You've heard Stephen Krashen. Those who don't know, Stephen Krashen is the one who discovered language acquisition, or at least he started working on it with someone else. I forgot what it was. He started doing research on it. For me, I took it further beyond that and connecting it to how it is to be present, because it comes back down to childlikeness. The one last thing, the one that I think is most important, is joy. When you're in the moment, you're in the zone, as people call it. You're in the zone. Okay. I totally forgot that I was going to speak German. Okay. So I'm going to go back to the joy thing. So I'm not doing this to kind of prove to you anything for myself. I don't feel like I need to prove anything, but you'll feel it. So I want you to feel where I'm coming from. If you start to sense that it's from a place of thought versus from a place of something natural, you'll sense it. You will know. If you can't sense it, that's totally fine. That's not the whole part of this whole video. But you'll sense it somehow. It's an example of the key to why, one, it's not even just about intuition. It's not any of that stuff. It's all of it. Your intuition, your instinct, your emotions, your thoughts, your body, all of it. They're all connected. We believe that they're separate. Okay. Also, am Anfang habe ich diese Spracherwerben, diese sogenannte Spracherwerben, euch erwähnt. Did you notice something there? The first few moments, there was a bit of flow there. The moment I had to think about, you see that? There's a flow there. Like you can sort of sense it, right? Okay. So, but if I were to go back to, let's say, the language that my parents, the language that I grew up with, before English, before I actually picked up English, was from the Philippines, like Tagalog. So, halimbawa, kung kailangan kong pag-isipan ang kailangan kong sabihin, makikita nyo sa aking body language na yung sasabihin ko, kailangan kong isipin. Did you notice that? So you sensed it, right? So that's the whole thing. I'm not saying that fluency is something that it's like, oh, perfection. No. That's nothing to do with that at all. But it's as Teal Swan in one of the videos, she was interviewed by Emilio Ortiz. I think his last name. Anyways, the point is, she talks about this idea of mastery. Mastery has nothing to do with perfection. Mastery is knowing that what you come, how far you've come is as far you come, and you kind of feel this sort of like, I feel accomplished in that case. But not necessarily for the sake of outcome. It's just like, I think I've come this far. Okay, great. Right? The focus is not on the end result. It's not the destination. It's the journey. You've heard this before. But that's the whole thing. We've heard things like this before. You hear me saying all this now, but it won't mean anything unless, I'm not going to say apply it, because this is not about doing what I say and just applying it. That's nothing to do with that. It's literally about together, alongside. This is why I wrote down here, together. You can't really see it. It's just together, not and. Okay. So it's about together bringing presence to acquiring language. And I mean, if you want to do the language learning stuff, the grammar stuff, that's probably, honestly for me, it was a headache. So, if you feel like you want to still do languages, like, do the grammar stuff and all that stuff, that's up to you. But I want to tie in where I know that I already knew about this from my years of learning how to be a teacher. There was just one component in all of my, my educational experience, learning to be a language teacher. There's one aspect. It was called language acquisition, and it's very simple actually. So what I'm going to do is, not right now, I'm going to, hopefully, I'm not sure, you'll see it. Just stay tuned for stories that I'm going to be sharing. They're going to be in English, of course, but you're going to see what I mean when it comes to all that stuff. So you'll see how it goes later. But stay tuned for that. I'm going to show you videos on, I saw this from other people, how they do it, but I'm going to take it to a different, I don't know, we'll see what happens. I can't really say what's going to happen, because that's not, you can plan things all you want, right? You can plan things all you want. It has to flow. It has to flow. That's the reality of things. Even the most solid things flow. There's a flow. There's energy. Everything's energy. Everything is change. It has solidification. Things form, and then they change as well. But change is inevitable. That's why we've heard this before. Okay? So it boils down to one very, 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 very simple thing. I see this a lot of times. Childlikeness. 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 It's very beautiful. It's light, easy. Even Eckhart puts it, he says, joy, ease, and something else. And that ties in exactly with what Stephen Krashen said once. He said it has to be easy, light, or something like that. Basically, the point is it's joy. Does it feel joy? Does it give you joy? If what you're doing, if language learning gives you joy, by all means, keep doing that. Personally, for me, language learning methods, to put it in a box, okay, would only be applicable to like dead languages, because there's no culture behind it. There's no culture behind it. There's nothing to, get from. There's nothing to form from. And this is one little thing I did forget to mention here. Underneath all this thing, there's the culture. But what is culture, right? Culture is behavior. That's all it is. Culture is behavior. However, there's collective culture and there's individualized culture. Never separate. They're just behaving differently. It's like two colors or two shades of the same color, right? Culture. There's individual culture and then there's collective culture. Why is there individual culture? Well, there is. It's called personality, or individual behavior, and also collective behavior. That's another way of putting that. When I call it that way, I don't necessarily mean in a very, this is the anthropological definition of that, blah, 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 blah. I don't give a shit about those definitions. I'm using the words that I know, that I feel like I sense is going to help you guys understand what I'm trying to transmit. Okay? So, individual culture, collective culture, or individual behavior, and collective behavior. So, without those, language is just symbols. Language is just language, right? So you're probably wondering, like, what does that have to do? How does language work in terms of like being all that stuff when it comes to like the writing system and all that stuff? That comes after. You acquire through listening first. So these are little tips that I'm going to give. So I'm going to write it down in comments. I'm going to write down the tips that I myself that has worked for me. So when it comes to like let's say you come across a new language, right? There are several things about it. One, depending on the language and the popularity of the language, unfortunately that is the case right now. This is why I would love for people to share their experiences by just going through stories. The reason why I say story, and this is part of language acquisition, it's really about stories. But why stories? Well, think about it. If you have stories, and we're not just talking like blah, 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 blah. I mean stories where your whole entire body is involved. Imagine this. Okay, imagine this. You come into a class. It's a language you don't know. And the teacher goes, they're not even a teacher, it's not even a classroom setting. It looks like a baking class, like a cooking class, right? And the teacher goes like, come on in. They do this. What am I doing? You see this body action? Visuals? Right? Come on in. This is just a common sign. Maybe not completely universal, but there's this feeling of like, this way, come on in. You keep seeing that, and then you get this intuitive feeling that we should go in. Right? So they get in, and they look around like, what's this? What's that? They see a bunch of like cups, they see a bunch of like cooking material, they see maybe like a wooden spoon, right? They see maybe like it's right here, a spatula, okay? They see like probably like a bowl, okay? Right here. Okay? So they see like a bowl, like a baking bowl like this one. Okay? So they see those things. Okay? And they see all those things, and she goes, come on in. And he says, okay, so they go into their introductions, right? And the teacher goes like, or teacher, the person who's doing the baking says, okay, so today we're gonna bake. And they say bake. You don't need to know what that baking is. They see this whole thing. So it looks kind of familiar. There's a bit of familiarity that you see with your eyes because of previous knowledge. Especially for like adults or even young people. They see it like, oh, baking. Children don't need to do this, right? When they see baking for the first time, they just know it's something like curious. They're just like, oh, what's that? Oh, what's this pan? What's this thing? They don't need to know exactly what it is. They just need to know how it is, right? So we shouldn't be concerning ourselves with the vocabulary. What is the grammar? The vocabulary? All that stuff, right? It's not that. That's not what works. That will come with time. That'll come along with the whole story thing, right? And this keeps happening. So the teacher introduces himself and he goes, okay, so here's the bowl. Here's the we're gonna bake today. But then he needs to know a bit of their names. So he goes like, oh, so what's your name? So my name, I'm Jose. My name is Jose. So he writes it down to them. Maybe he goes like, just say, I'm Jose. What about you? What's your name? What's your name? Sometimes I'll use the whole like this thing, like a name tag sort of symbol. Okay, I'll do this like, what's your name? And the person goes like, okay, so my name, Jose. I'm Jose. What's your name? And he's like, and they probably start to kind of feel it. It's intuitive, right? They go like, Yusuf? Maybe they're Turkish or something like that. I don't know. Yusuf? And then this Yusuf goes like, oh, hi, Yusuf. Then you shake their hand. So you go, shake your hand. They shake their hand. And they go, okay, so today, Yusuf, can you help me? Can you help me get that flour over there? Get the flour. See, I'm saying a bunch of things there, but you'll get the point that it's not even about vocabulary. The moment they start to associate what they see, when we associate what we see with what we already have acquired before, with the situation that's going on, with how we're intuiting the situation and everything else, and the action that's being taken, and the feeling we're getting out of the whole thing because of our curiosity, we start to see, oh, wow, so this is flour. They don't really analyze that it's flour. They just feel like, they hear flour, they hear spoon, they hear this, right? And that's just like at the basic, foundational level. Okay, I don't believe in levels, personally. I don't believe in levels. Because once you put it in levels, we start putting things in a box. A1, A2, B1, B2, 3C1, C2, and then what? Oh, I'm C2, I'm a native speaker. I'm so perfect, I don't need to do anything else. Think about it. You process that a little bit, right? And then you're like, right? Even native speakers, we're still acquiring things as we move along in life, right? So, absolutely, like, not my thing. So, anyways, going back to the whole thing. So now Yusuf grabs all that stuff. He starts, and then they come back. They start baking, and then they start to do the same thing, the same process. Like, what's your name, Sophie? And what's your name? Da, da, da. So they get to know each other, and then they kind of just like, maybe they even start to speak each other in their own languages. Maybe there might be some translation here and there, maybe a little bit, but the focus will be then on the whole process itself. It feels interactive. It feels like they're engaging. Right, there's a connection, and that's what we're being, right? That's what we're humans. In this form, we are social beings. I mean, I'm just getting this from other people. There's the only one thing that I learned, this was like last year, was it a few years ago? I said, the only thing that's ever original is origin itself. So in other words, we are original. So we don't even need to prove that we're original. the fact that we are experiencing is original on its own. You don't need to be original. A lot of times I see this a lot on YouTube. It's like there's this desire, and I feel like the same way too. I still do feel like, so what was that? What is that term that we use? What's that syndrome? The false. What is that? Whatever the term is, the false person. Like I'm fake. I'm not real. Right? That kind of syndrome. And we go through this all the time. But it's just like, there's no such thing. You are unique in your own being as a source, as a part of source, always and never ever connected. Never separate, but always connected. Okay? So, why do we need to separate things and put things in a box? Like, this is what we do, but really what it is, it's all about interaction. So, it helps to have basic vocabulary, so to speak. At the very minimum, for me, I even cringe at this sometimes, like, translate. And the reason why translation is very detrimental is because, think about it. And this is where you really have to think about it. Or process it. Think about it. When you translate, what happens? You get the definition of the word, or you get the meaning of the word in your own language. And then what happens? You keep thinking about the word and how to use that in your own language. Because there's an intrinsic, deeper, pre-acquired, how do you call this? It's like a process, sort of like understanding of that concept before, when you were younger. It's at a subconscious level and also unconscious level. When you see something in your mother tongue, because it's unconscious. Now, personally, I don't believe that just because we're adults, and also that when we come across a second language or a third or fourth, whatever, that we cannot be native speakers in those languages. The term native speaker is it's just bullshit. It's like, what do you mean native speaker? Oh, because you weren't born with that language, that you cannot speak it at all? That's not true. I've seen it countless times, where people started to acquire fluency, and this is just the simplest way of putting it. They acquired fluency over time. When I say over time, I mean like for some reason what they were doing was just like they started to understand it. Like what I did, for example, when I studied German in university, that did nothing at all. And yes, I translated, there was a lot of those words that were translated. It's just like a kind of a book. When you go through a driving manual, you translate it to what you know. The translation doesn't just happen between languages. Translation happens between your understanding of what you know and what you're trying to get, what's in front of you. It's a way of understanding things. It's how the brain works. That's why it creates neurons and neurons and neurons. That's why it's plastic, right? But if we want to make it more filled with quality, if you want to have more quality into what we're doing, let's forget the middleman. Let's forget that whole process of getting the vocabulary beforehand and then translating it. Even if you get vocabulary the first time and it's not translated, you say you get pictures, right? Great. It's still slower compared to, remember I said slow, not bad. I didn't call it bad. I didn't say it wrong. I just said it's slower. Okay? It's slower than compared to if you were just interacting in the moment. And the reason why interaction is important, it's not because you're just interacting and you're just doing this. It's because there's an emotion involved. Emotion comes from the heart. If you've seen this before, there's a reason why the brain has a lower magnetic frequency in the field, not the frequency, the field, than the heart. The heart is where the emotions are. Incense. That sometimes happens to me. So anyways, You get the whole point, right? So that's my whole thing. So I'm gonna drink some water. So this is a natural thing. So when it comes to all this stuff that I'm talking about, when it comes to languages, all this stuff that I just mentioned earlier today, it really comes down to being natural. But to be natural is not so much about just being natural, but listening from within. This is why I did say together with spirituality. And I say it's spirituality because that's just a label. Our own inner nature, our own being is not any more natural and not any less natural than where we come from. Okay? And when I say come from, I don't mean like, oh, we have to wait till we go back there. No, it's already here. This is why children know this. Intrinsically, they know this. Instinctively, intuitively, emotionally, physically, spiritually, yada, 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 yada. Okay? These are just words. These are just words. This is just the words. I'm getting you to understand it, sort of thing. Whether you understand it or not, that's not the point. The point is when we are at the peak of our essence, we understand that acquisition actually in itself becomes a natural process. So I hope that helps you guys. That's all I'm going to say for now. There's always more to say. I'm going to list down the tips that I'm going to put in. I don't have time anymore to list down. This video is getting quite long about the tips that I would give. I don't list them at all. I just kind of like bullet point them. That's it. If you ever have any questions on those kind of things, let me know. Right? Yeah. Feel free to connect with me here. I'm more than willing. If you want to look at credentials, okay. I've been a teacher for over 10 years. And this is one of the things that I believe works. And it has helped a friend of mine. I might post a video on the progress he's made from the first time we met to the second, to the about 4 months after that. He made huge improvements just in the 4 months. I mean, because we were only meeting like once a week or something like that. But imagine if you're completely exposed, as if it's like your own, as if you are going back to your own tongue, as if your second language, you treat it like your own language, like your own tongue. Meaning, it's not even about the language. Again, it's not about the language. It's not about the words. It's not even about the methods. It's not about any of these things. It is about the exposure. It's about the experience of life, right? This is what that thing is called, immersion, exposure, immersion, being in it, but stems from just being. That's how it's connected. So go with the breath. Go with the breath. Go with the breath. And just here. And just joy. Be curious. Find yourself in that joy of that moment. Of that inner knowing that is like, I'm always connected. Awesome. Therefore, if I'm always connected, this language that this ego seems not to know, is already something I know. You'll feel it. Once you know, you know. However, we do live in a 3D world still, right? Or, many of us are realizing that we're elevating. And even if you're not, don't worry. It's not a big deal. There's no such thing as separate. Okay? So, yeah, I hope that helps. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys later as I turn this off.